How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings and welcome, America. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-973-7425. However, the call screener has had to step away. So you're just with me this hour. And actually, so I've waited, you will notice, to put all the student protest stuff here in the third hour because I actually have some big news, and I want to put it in a larger perspective for you. But before I do that, let me get to this news. Greenberg Traurig is one of the major law firms in the nation. They have yesterday filed a massive lawsuit against the American Muslims for Palestine, the National Students for Justice in Palestine, and they're seeking compensatory damages for 9 American and Israeli victims of the attacks in which Hamas killed those in Israel and took people hostage. Now, here's what they're doing. I'm going to read for you the press release, and I want you to know this lawsuit is being filed by Greenberg Traurig for the National Jewish Advocacy Center, that is Schoen Law Firm, and the Holtzman Vogel Law Firm. And this is a very big deal. I'm just going to read for you. The lawsuit seeks compensatory damages and alleges that AMP, that is the American Muslims for Palestine, and NSJP, that is the National Students for Justice in Palestine, work in the United States as collaborators and propagandists for Hamas. Hamas is a United States designated foreign terrorist organization. The suit notes that AMP and NSJP are merely the current versions of several prior entities that were already determined by the U.S. government to be supporters of Hamas. I couldn't be prouder of our firm for taking on this important representation. It is an honor to lend our voice and resource to this fight in support of the plaintiffs who have suffered greatly, said Richard Rosenbaum, executive chairman of the law firm. The suit alleges AMP and NSJP responded on October 8, 2023, the day after the attacks by Hamas, by participating in the terrorist propaganda to justify its appalling brutalities. AMP and NSJP answered Hamas's call for mass mobilization by disseminating a manifesto and plan of attack. The manifesto confirms that AMP and NSJP are not merely organizing to assist Hamas's terror campaign abroad. They are intentionally extending their aid to fomenting chaos, violence, and terror in the United States. The lawsuit states that plaintiffs, survivors of Hamas's October 7th terror attack, family members of those murdered by Hamas, civilians still under fire from Hamas's ongoing terrorism, and persons displaced by Hamas's ongoing terrorism have been and continue to be injured because AMP and NSJP knowingly provide continuous, systematic, and substantial assistance to Hamas and its affiliates. You want to talk about coordination? These organizations, according to this lawsuit, essentially are alleged to coordinate with Hamas. Now, not only that, there's another story. A veteran activist joined Columbia protesters. Police call her a professional agitator. Listen to this. This is from NBC News. As pro-Palestinian student protesters took over a building at Columbia in New York on Tuesday, one person in the crowd outside stood out, a gray-haired woman who delivered orders to young people helping barricade a door. "Tie it right to the lock," she told 2 mass protesters holding zip ties, according to video. The protesters did as they were told, using the ties on a metal table pressed against the door of Hamilton Hall. "Let's give them a little cover," the older woman told the crowd. Cameras back, cameras back." The woman was not a Columbia University student or faculty member. She was, in fact, no affiliation to the school at all. She's a 63-year-old veteran activist named Lisa Fithian, whom the New York police describe as a professional agitator. The takeover of Hamilton Hall was a significant escalation of the strategy used by students demanding that Columbia divest from corporations that could be profiting from the war in Gaza. So far, Fithian is the only outsider city officials have identified as playing a part. New York police officials believe Fithian could be one of the people responsible for training the protesters in the tactics they used to occupy Hamilton Hall, according to two senior city officials. A police spokesperson said she was not one of the roughly 50 people arrested. Fithian is no stranger to high-profile protests. For roughly 50 years, she's participated in demonstrations for a dizzying array of causes at home and abroad. In my years as an anti-racist organizer, I have shut down the CIA, disrupted the World Trade Organization's first major meeting, helped launch Common Ground Relief, a grassroots organization that supported communities in New Orleans after Katrina. She writes this in her book, Shut It Down, Stories from a Fierce, Loving Resistance. I've camped in a ditch with Cindy Sheehan, the Gold Star mom who protested the Iraq War. I stood my ground in Tahrir Square and set sail on the U.S. and women's boats to Gaza. She did not respond to messages. She told the New York Times she was absolutely not organizing the protests. Now, all this gets to a larger point. We all know there's a level of coordination with outside groups, and now we've got this lawsuit from Greenberg Traurig against two pro-Palestinian groups that they allege are agents of Hamas. We know that the student groups out there tied to the Palestinian cause are supporting the terrorists and, in fact, are the ones who purchase tents and other supplies for students on campuses around the country. But this gets to a larger issue here. It gets to the insanity of the cause. Queers for Palestine, that gay activist from Colombia who said all Zionists should die, if he went to Gaza, as I said the other day, his pronouns would go from he, they to splat her. He would be the first one thrown off the building. What is this all about? Progressivism is a mental illness of sorts, and it's tied to Marxist political theory. You've got to understand this to understand what's going on here. They believe the entire world is structured based on power. And if you have power, you must use the power. That's why they, for example, want to block Jewish students from libraries and elsewhere. They are exerting their power. How do they determine power? Power is determined by multiple things. Power is determined, as I've mentioned ad nauseum on this program, oppressors versus oppressed. They see the world divided between oppressors and oppressed and decide to game themselves as oppressed peoples and the allies of oppressed people. So what do they do to make this case? In many ways, they just change words. So follow along with me here. I played the audio yesterday. There's no reason to play it again today. But yesterday, what happened? The narrative changed, and you see it and hear it in this NBC News story as well. These aren't really just student protesters. They're outside agitators. It's the outsiders to blame. We shouldn't be blaming the students. You have progressive professors going on CNN and MSNBC saying it's not the students who are anti-Semitic, it's the outsiders. Pay no attention to your lying eyes. Pay no attention to what the students are actually saying. They're trying to change the words. They're trying to change the dichotomy. And to do that, they're trying to change the power and the power structure. By changing the language, by changing the words, they change the power structure. That's what's happening here. That's what's meaningful here. That's what you have to pay attention to here. It's all about power for them. It is a Marxist idea. You see, so there are systems of justice in the world. There's the most famous, I think, system of justice in the world is the Christian system of justice, the Judeo-Christian system of justice, I should say. It is one standard of justice in the world, and that is essentially servant leadership. The Marxist system doesn't believe in servant leadership because the servants have been oppressed. And so what the servants must be given is power, and the servants dominate. And the Marxist theory of peace is that once the oppressed rise above the oppressor class, the oppressed will not oppress because they've been oppressed, and so they will stop. Except this isn't what we see in the history of mankind. The oppressed become the oppressor and start murdering everybody. But that's why there's so many deep contradictions in it all across the board, because the Marxist power structure premised solely on power doesn't account for human identity, doesn't account for other political theory, doesn't account for religion. It doesn't take religion seriously. It doesn't take the idea of sinful people seriously. Everybody's a blank slate, tabula rasa. Everyone can be defined and shaped and molded by the state once the oppressed have power. So that's why you get Kamala Harris yesterday, for example, doing a big speech about women's power and women matter, but she can't tell you what the hell a woman is. What's a woman? Well, a woman has female reproductive organs unless they're a trans woman, and that works, except trans women can't have abortions, and so we don't need their voices with abortion. It's all going to be just real women who are irrelevant for sports because men can take their place in sport. None of it makes sense. It is the logic of the insane asylum. Marxism, at heart, is the logic of an insane asylum. Queers for Palestine makes no sense in reality, but in the insane asylum of the power dynamics of Marxism, it makes a ton of sense. They view themselves as oppressed. They view the Palestinians as oppressed. Pay no attention to reality. In fact, what do? They use words to alter reality. Israelis, Jews, they're European transplants. That's what they've decided. Their words now make reality. Pay no attention to the history. Pay no attention to where the Jews come from. Pay no attention to the kingdom of David. Pay no attention to biblical archaeology. Pay no attention to secular archaeology. Pay no attention to that. They have redefined Jews as Europeans. Therefore, they've redefined the Jews to be in the oppressor class because Europeans are white and white people are oppressors. The Palestinians are dark-skinned, therefore they're the oppressed. And by the way, as an aside, it's all deeply racist too. The darker your skin, the more oppressed you are. Well, guess who originally sold the slaves into slavery? It wasn't white people ruling the African tribes. But let's not go there. It's all the logic of the insane asylum. It's all the logic of people obsessed with power. And there's a fatal flaw in it as well, because just as you can never be woke enough, you can never be oppressed enough, you can never be an ally enough. Eventually, they turn on each other. It's like the hordes of Mordor. You read The Lord of the Rings or you watch the movies, it's something that Peter Jackson caught very accurately, very precisely. When there are no human beings around, the orcs and all of them, they're just as nasty to each other, if not more so. They tear each other limb from limb. It's a reflection of the communist ideal. It's what happens when everything is premised on raw power. There's no tempering. It is the logic of the insane asylum played out in Marxist political thought. It's happening on college campuses. And what's so notable is these kids have outside organizers helping them change the language, participate in the protest, arrange the supplies for them, because these kids are all helpless trust fund babies who should be denied jobs in the real world. And yet, they continue to suffer through the Ivy League with the logic of the insane asylum and the backing of a media that just tries to cover for them. It's where we are as a country right now. It's unfortunate that that's where we are as a country right now, but also I do have hope. Studying the history of this, studying the history of communism, studying the history of Marxism, it ultimately crumbles in on itself as people rebel to it. And we're going to see that in real time in this country over the next few months as the purge in Chicago at the DNC begins.
Blinds.com Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. Real quick, I want to call your attention to what I tell you all the time, but I really do mean it. It doesn't cost you a penny if you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. I will send you back a series of links. My show notes, the podcast link to Spotify and Apple, the live stream link, all my social media links, so you can follow me around the internet and stuff and just keep in touch with me there and follow the show. Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. I cover the cost of that text message. You don't have to, and it's a great way to keep in touch. Did y'all see at Harvard, they were having a GPA honor ceremony yesterday, and some of those little idiot clowns decided they didn't want their awards for making good grades. They wanted to protest against genocide in Gaza. I really genuinely believe that many of the kids who are getting these awards, they're actually not that smart. It's grade inflation, something that's happened in the Ivies. And they should have their award yanked. In fact, I saw somebody protesting at UCLA, and he had a sign, and he said, let's trade the hostages Hamas has for 12 of these students for each hostage. It'll be good for us, it'll be good for Hamas, and it'll be a great educational experience for the protesters. It's such a genius idea. Why aren't these protesters, if they want to solve the situation in Gaza, why don't they offer to be the hostages? Offer to exchange places with the hostages. That would solve the problem. Israel would stop fighting. Hamas wouldn't know what to do with them, particularly if they belong to Queers for Palestine. But we'd get the hostages back. The war would be over. These kids protesting, they could be the solution, dare I say a final solution to the problem of this war in Gaza. If they volunteered to do it, why don't they step up and do it? You know, I actually have to give kudos, I know, bear with me, to Elizabeth Warren, who was calling for a ceasefire on MSNBC, but was smart enough to say, we need the hostages back. We need a ceasefire, and to get a ceasefire, we need the hostages. If Elizabeth Warren is smart enough to show compassion for the hostages, you would think that these kids would be too, except they're not. So why don't they exchange places with the hostages? If they truly care about the starving children of Gaza, which they say is the defining issue, the humanitarian crisis, the genocide, if they really care about the genocide and the starving babies of Gaza, trade places with the hostages. Tell Hamas, you get us. Hell, I'll raise the money for them. We'll do a GoFundMe here and send them to Gaza and get the hostages out. And bygones, a great, great solution. You know, Americans for Prosperity wants to remind you of solutions. We have the solutions to fix the economy. We have the solutions. We know the solutions. We know what works. Americans for Prosperity has for quite some time now been elevating the conservative solutions that can take on the current economy. And it's worth remembering that we kind of actually know what works. We kind of actually know that these ideas for free markets and individual responsibility, they work to solve problems. So Americans for Prosperity, they're doing a bus tour around the country to remind you prosperity is possible. In fact, if you go to prosperityispossible.com, you can find out where the bus tour is. And remember that we have solutions in the free market, in conservatism, to get spending under control, bring down energy prices, stop government from forcing workers into unions, and so much more. You go to prosperityispossible.com. prosperityispossible.com, brought to you by Americans for Prosperity. Welcome back, conversationalists across the fruited plain. It is Eric Erickson here. So I did a thing. Next month, my book comes out, and it is on the money, on the topic of these protests. Didn't plan it that way. I did not coordinate the protests to make. I didn't do any of this stuff. It just works. It's perfect. The book is called You Shall Be as Gods. It is about the wokes and this progressive religion that is growing. Now, there are people, in fact, I know we do a research project all the time, and one of the things that's come up again is there are a lot of listeners who just stay away from the religion stuff. So this isn't the religion stuff. But what it is to point out to you that what is happening in the world right now, what we're seeing, these college protests around the country and stuff, it is a religion. So we're not talking about Christianity. We're not talking about Buddhism. We're not talking about Hinduism. We're talking about secularism is in itself a bit of a religion, and it's Gnostic in the basis. And that is what my book is about. If you want to order a copy, we've got it on sale right now. You can text the word data to 33777. And let me just read you just a little bit of what I have written. You ready? 2 archaeological finds in the 1940s in the Near East gave scholars insight into early Christianity. Scrolls dating from around the time of Christ were discovered in the Qumran caves along the shores of the Dead Sea. This incredible find, preserved for nearly 2 millennia, would come to be called the Dead Sea Scrolls and includes some of the oldest known complete copies of several Old Testament books. These texts are an archaeological gold mine and helped theologians confirm the accuracy of modern manuscripts by demonstrating how carefully the Bible had been copied and translated over time. The biblical texts found in the Qumran were consistent with the copies made 1,000 years later by medieval monks. A second significant find was made in December 1945 near the town of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, along the banks of the Nile River, where a group of men uncovered a buried clay jar. One man, Muhammad Ali, not the boxer, broke the jar open hoping to find gold or treasure. It was treasure, but not gold. What the men found instead was a collection of 13 leather-bound papyrus books. The codices contained 52 Greek texts, which had been translated into Coptic, including a passage from Plato's Republic. Some scholars believe they were buried during the 4th century by a local monastery. Today, the 13 codices also are displayed in Cairo's Coptic Museum. Like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi texts have been studied by archaeologists, historians, theologians, and other scholars. However, where the Dead Sea Scrolls contain Hebrew scriptures or historic texts, the majority of the texts found at the Nag Hammadi site were Gnostic treatises. During the 1970s and 1980s, several translations of what became known as the Gnostic Gospels were published, sparking a renewed interest in Gnosticism and various attempts to harmonize Gnostic teachings with Christianity. The Gnostic Gospels, including the Gospels of Thomas, Mary, Philip, and Truth, are not included in the 66 canonical books of the Bible and aren't considered reliable sources. There are doubts as to who wrote them and when, but most significantly, the Gnostic message of the books is contrary to Christianity. So what is Gnosticism? The roots go back to the Garden of Eden, when the serpent promises Adam and Eve the secret knowledge that God was keeping from them. Through this knowledge, Adam and Eve would be like God. Of course, we know how the story ends. Gnostics rejected the biblical account of creation and the fall. Instead of a good world created by a good God, they believed everything physical had been made by a lesser godlike being. The material creation, like human bodies, is evil, filled with death and decay. In Gnosticism, humanity's sin is ignorance, and the path of salvation is through gnosis, or knowledge. When we have the right knowledge, we can be redeemed from the evil material world. Now, Christianity's been fighting Gnosticism for a while. I'm skipping ahead, painting this picture for you. Through the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church fought back Gnosticism. The Reformation fought back Gnosticism. And then the humanists and the Romantics seized upon Christianity and the idea of rebirth. And suddenly Gnosticism took on a whole new idea. Humanism took the Gnostic idea of the divine spark. Instead of a spark of divinity inside each human being, humans are the center of everything. In humanism, everything revolves around us and exists for our glory. Gnosticism influenced many of the cultural and political movements of the 20th century. The connection between political revolutions and Gnosticism goes back to the first century clashes between the zealots of the Roman government. If the material created world is evil, then the political structures and governments of the world are evil. To free the divine spark within and achieve utopia, the evil must be overthrown. The revolutionaries have secret knowledge or insight to bring about a new enlightened political order. Does this sound familiar? The ideology of Nazi Germany was Gnostic, attempting to purify the world of evil, corrupting influences of Jews and the Jewish religion. The Old Testament God of the Hebrews was pitted against an Aryan Jesus and a positive Christianity. Positive Christianity, by the way, it wasn't positive, it wasn't Christian. The term was an attempt to take Nazi paganism based on Gnosticism and twist it into Christianity. The Nazi German attempt to take over the world was part of its vision to create an Aryan utopia. Now, it wasn't just the Nazis, they're kissing cousins, the communists. Karl Marx took Gnosticism. In Marxist ideology, capitalism and the oppressive bourgeois class are the root of all evil, and the noble proletariat class must be set free. Marx and the leaders who followed him were the keepers of the secret knowledge necessary for the enlightenment of the proletariat. The ultimate goal was to implement communism, which would end the exploitation of people. There's no heaven except what we make on earth. That's the common thread of Gnosticism. World War I and World War II had a significant role in the development. In the past, wars were fought across continental Europe. While kings and queens and princes played a role, the church would step in to alleviate the suffering of the poor, serving as the medics in the field. With the World Wars, the Red Cross and secular organizations stepped in to perform the charitable role churches used to play. Where the church was trying to lead people to God, the secular entities were leading people into reliance on government. Creating an interdependent, interconnected civilization where people were tied to non-governmental entities like the United Nations would bring about an end of war, and we would have what? Peace for all time. As the government began to take over social welfare, the church began to be seen as competition. You don't want people going to the church for help. You want them going to the government for help. You want them on the social safety net. The government took over areas where the church had thrived: adoption, foster care, caring for widows, orphans, the poor, the hungry. The government is not effective at doing any of those things. And now, here we are with postmodern Gnosticism, which emphasizes self and personal experience. There are no absolutes. Truth is whatever you want it to be. Religious beliefs are personal. Religious practice is individualistic. In fact, many people today like to say they're spiritual. We're not religious. New Age spirituality and religious practices incorporate elements of ancient religion. What's old is new again. Healing crystals have replaced the household idols. Ouija boards and mediums connect us to the spirit world. They're drugs for enlightenment and transcendence and getting closer to God. Spirituality is self-focused. The goal is to improve yourself, soothe yourself, be true to yourself. In the postmodern ideal, we are our own truth. I'm never the problem. You're the problem because you've got your truth and I have my truth. And when our truths are incompatible, you're the heretic, not me. We've created a God in our own image. It's called self. Carl Trueman has a great book called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. There's a quote I put in the book. An overriding desire for interpersonal happiness and a sense of psychological well-being lie at the heart of the modern age and make ethics at root a subjective discourse. Human beings may still like to think they believe in good and bad, but these concepts are unhitched from any transcendent framework and merely reflect personal, emotional, and psychological preferences. Whatever your truth, you can find an expert to support your point of view. Every cultural sociological movement has a medical doctor and a scientist with a PhD to form the basis of its claims. There are doctors who promote vaccines cause autism. There are scientists claiming having children is scientifically proven to harm the environment, so smaller families are a moral obligation. And some doctors will tell you life doesn't begin until the child exits the womb, or, hey, you can pick your gender. Language then tracks the political consensus of the scientific community, and it's a political consensus. Secular liberals have worked very hard to co-opt cultural institutions so that regardless of truth, science reflects opinion instead of opinion reflecting science. The two-parent heterosexual nuclear household may have been for thousands of years the most stable way to raise children. But get a bunch of liberal sociologists masquerading as scientists together in a room, and soon they'll tell you science says two-parent heterosexual nuclear households are bigoted, white supremacist parts of the patriarchy. Gnostic influence is especially clear in our cultural obsession with identity. Our identity comes from within and is subjective. Instead of being created in the image of God, male and female, you get to create yourself in your own image and decide whether you're male or female, black or white. Rachel Dolezal identified as a black woman, even though she's white. Ellen Page, born biologically female, but now she says she's Elliot, and you're a bigot if you don't believe her. And by the way, Juno is now deeply, deeply problematic and confusing. Caitlyn Jenner was always the truth behind Bruce Jenner. Gnosticism manifests itself in radical environmentalism. With environmentalism, we go from controlling nature so that we flourish to controlling ourselves so nature flourishes. And then, of course, Gnostic wokeism. All of this is in my book, You Shall Be as Gods. It explains what's happening right now, the Gnosticism involved in wokeism, that there is a secret knowledge and a path to that secret knowledge. And for the Marxists, that path is power. And if you understand the power dynamics, it opens the world around you to possibilities. And those possibilities always involve you controlling it. Gnosticism is the understanding that there is a hidden truth. It's what drove Adolf Hitler. It's what drove Karl Marx. It's what drove Lenin and Stalin. It's what drove Pol Pot and Mao. This idea of a secret knowledge that they could unlock. It's what's driving these campus protests right now. So, that is a portion of my book. I did not intend it to be this timely tome about what's happening in the world right now. So many people have told me this is something you need to write. I sat down, I wrote it. In fact, my buddy Bill Blankshane helped me tremendously because I essentially did it as radio monologues. He would call me and I would just talk for 2 hours, like twice a week. And then he would transcribe it and I would reference stuff and he would go find it to footnote it and cite it to make sure I wasn't plagiarizing and all that sort of stuff. So it was a somewhat of a different process, but my goodness, it worked. And the book comes out in June. If you want to order it, text the word data to 33777. The second link will be, in fact, you know what? Let me try it right now just to make sure I'm giving you the right one. 33777 is what I text. And then I send the word data. And what does Eric text back? I text back 2 links. The first, subscribe to the show notes and get 20% off. The second, get my book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You should get my book. Now, around the country as we expand, I'm going to come after the book comes out. I'll do book signings so that you can show up. We'll do events. I'll work with the different stations and program directors to make that happen. I know we'll be doing some in Atlanta. You know, this comes out just after my birthday. I was telling a buddy of mine last night, I have not, since I've grown up, had a birthday party. We do like a small family thing, but no one's ever thrown me a surprise party. No one's thrown me a grown-up adult party, except once with Clark Howard. We did an event when I was turning like 35 and he was turning 65, and we did like a 100th birthday celebration. But I want to. My program director at WSB in Atlanta. I would call him my boss. He wants to do something for the book, and we'll tie all this stuff together. I'm kind of excited. I'm really proud of this book. I didn't intend, as I said, for it to be as timely as it is, but it is. It's relevant to the culture. It's not a book per se about faith. It is a book about what's happened to secularism, where secularism can abide no other religion but itself. And it's manifesting itself on college campuses and around the country in various shapes and forms that really do become dangerous. One of the ways is how progressive activists want to take over institutions, cultural and otherwise, and drive out conservatives. We're seeing that in banking. You know, Bank of America and USAA are alleged to have shut down the bank account of John Eastman, who is one of Donald Trump's lawyers, who's been under investigation for the January 6th stuff and the stolen election stuff, and they closed his bank accounts. That's the allegation, at least. If you go to Old Glory Bank, you never have to worry about that. Old Glory Bank was founded by conservatives for conservatives to push back against these debanking trends and bank cancellation trends we're seeing around the country. They have exceedingly great bill pay and stuff. In fact, yesterday I did this. So I've done it before, and now I've done it with the mobile app, and it works. So you can deposit cash into Old Glory Bank. It's really innovative. They're now, when I started advertising for them, the 85,000 locations, there are now 88,000 locations around the country. What you do is you do this mobile cash pay on their app. Their app is great. It gives you a QR code. You take it to a local store that's got a ID. Find your nearest one. Mine's CVS by my house. They scan the QR code with their shop scanner. You give them the cash. They put it in the cash register, but then it gets credited to your account. It just works like magic. Old Glory Bank, super innovative, super conservative. They want your accounts. They charge no fees on their checking or savings account. You go to oldglorybank.com. Oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Y'all, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I want you to know up front, I've been summoned to a super secret meeting of the vast right-wing conspiracy. You know, when I started doing these meetings, when I was young and at Red State, they'd send you someplace boring, like Sarasota. There's a Ritz-Carlton down there, and go there for a lot of meetings. And then there was a Ritz-Carlton on the list. They always like Ritz-Carltons. Well, instead, I get to go to Las Vegas in just a little while. In fact, I'm scrambling because my flight, I was supposed to be on a 7 o'clock flight. I guess it got canceled. I got moved to a 5:40 flight, so I got to rush out of here and get to the airport to get on a flight. But I got meetings, so yeah, I'm going to have some fun. Buddy of mine is going to go with me who's never been out there. I'm going to take him to the Grand Canyon tomorrow afternoon by helicopter. But I've got a lot of meetings and speaking stuff as well. I had to actually cancel one on Sunday because it's my daughter's baccalaureate on Sunday. So I got to get home as quick as I can. Delta, don't cancel my flight on Sunday. I got to get home and get changed and go to baccalaureate on Sunday. I cannot believe my kid is graduating. So anyway, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. Those of you up in Greenville, I adore you, and I hope you will text Eric to 33777. Make sure you keep in touch with me. I got to still get up there. I got some great friends I need to go see in Greenville at some point soon. Maybe we can organize a book signing up there as well. In any event, let me just say this before I get out of here. I really think, I want to measure my words here carefully. I really think that there's a level of despondency on the right that I've seen because of my piece defending the free market. And they've really decided that, no, you don't understand. You don't know what time it is. We need to behave just like the left. We need to take over the government, and we need to use the government for our purposes. It's like what I said earlier in the show, the problem I have with the anti-Semitism awareness legislation is you're giving the government power that's going to be used against you. If you really want to fight the left, don't fight like the left. You don't have to. If you gut the government, you neutralize their powers, and then you, through the free marketplace, through boycotting corporations that have gone woke. Look what happened with Bud Light and the like. You've got power to make change. And we're seeing this with college campuses. Yeah, look, I am all in favor of taxing the endowments of the Ivy League. You got over $1 billion, we're going to take part of it. And we're going to use it to cancel student loans and the cancel student loan programs and give kids grants. We're not going to bail out student loans. We're just going to cancel the program. And universities are either going to have to go bankrupt or find the money to help the kids or lower their tuition. We got ways to do this. Our ways aren't their ways. We don't have to fight them in their way. We have better ways to fight. So don't give up. Y'all have a great weekend.